Welcome to the Nerd Party.
Welcome to your break from the hyperspace holiday rush. Great Shot Kid here on the Nerd Party Network, a podcast dedicated to analyzing the works of Star Wars creators. I am one of your hosts, John.
And I'm Mike.
And this week on Great Shot Kid, we are going to be analyzing, looking back at the Disney classic directed by Joe Johnston, The Rocketeer, which actually was, I remember it coming out, The Rock-a-Who? That was a big-time marketing campaign. So, strap your rocket packs on. And, Mike, why don't you, in a nutshell, let everybody know what The Rocketeer is?
Well, The Rocketeer is a movie based on a comic book by Dave Stevens, who is an amazing artist and comic booketeer. And it is about a guy who is a pilot, a hotshot pilot in good old 1938, and he stumbles across an experimental jetpack which allows him to fly around without a plane. And this jetpack is being sought after by the government and by the Nazis and by all sorts of people who are willing to kill him to get it. And he needs to protect himself and his loved ones and perhaps become a superhero in the process.
Yes. It is hands down a movie that you can watch, and as I was rewatching it for this, you can look at it and you can say, wow, whoever did this was definitely heavily influenced by George Lucas and Steven Spielberg. There is a stamp all over this film where you are half surprised. In my opinion, you're half surprised not to see a Lucasfilm limited production on it.
Yeah.
There are so many sensibilities that carry through. And of course, for anybody who doesn't know, Johnston was one of the art team that helped shape the original Star Wars movies, the original trilogy, Star Wars, Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi. And so he helped develop some of the artistic elements of three of the biggest movies of our youths. And a lot of those artistic sensibilities carry through very much. He helped with the storyboards on the original trilogy as well. So he definitely comes from a storyboard school of thought, which I think is also reflected.
Well, in addition to Star Wars, of course, he also, and in Star Wars, he was also a designer. He is, the guy who basically created Boba Fett, right? He's credited with doing that. He created the final designs for Boba Fett and for Yoda. Obviously, a lot of people worked on both of those, but yeah. And he won an Oscar for Raiders of the Lost Ark for being part of the visual effects team.
Yeah.
And then, after winning an Oscar for Raiders of the Lost Ark, he's talking with George Lucas or whatever, and he's saying that he wants to be a director or something along those lines. And Lucas says, well, what you should really do is go to film school. You should go to USC. And he's like, let me pitch an idea to you. This is Lucas talking to Johnston. Mm-hmm. Lucas is like, I will put in a good word for you at USC. I will pay your tuition, and I will keep you on as a part-time employee so that you'll still be making a little bit of money on the side, and you will go to film school, and when you come back, you'll have the tools that you need in order to be a filmmaker. So Joe Johnston, with an Oscar under his belt, goes to film school, and studies how to be a filmmaker, and then comes back and almost immediately, I think, makes Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. And then, as well as this, and working on the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles and everything. So, God, obviously Lucas saw something in him,
Obviously Lucas saw something in him, and I love hearing stories like that, because I think what a lot of people lose sight of with Lucas as well is that he's always been about shepherding new talent through.
Yeah.
Johnston had the talent and he recognized it, but how many bosses out there, especially in creative fields, don't view somebody like Johnston as a threat, but instead say, hey, you know what? You do have something and I'm going to pay for school for you. Like that's a pretty fantastic thing.
I just keep on thinking, because I went to film school. I didn't go to USC, but I went to film school, and I just keep on thinking of me and everyone who went with me. And I can just imagine if someone walked in and they're like, so, oh, look at this older guy who's in his 30s, what's he doing here? What do you want to be? He's like, well, I've won an Oscar for Raiders of the Lost Ark. I mean, that's so crazy. That's so crazy. But yeah, obviously it worked out because we got the
it worked out pretty well. You know what? Because Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, that was a huge hit. I mean, that was a big mega hit back in the 80s.
That was a fairly big staple for me when I was a kid growing up.
Successful enough to trigger a sequel.
Yeah. And
which is, that's pretty solid.
And a TV show, I think, right? It was a TV show for a little while.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, gosh, I haven't thought back on that.
And a couple of amusement park attractions.
Oh yeah, Disney World. They had a Honey, I Shrunk the Kids 3D movie, didn't they?
Yeah, Honey, I Shrunk the Audience.
Yeah, that's right. So aside from Shrinking Kids, we get The Rocketeer, which is very much a movie that is, of the milieu that speaks to a great big influence on a lot of filmmakers in the 80s, which is Nazi bad guys set in the 1930s, serialized action, and that Art Deco sensibility that we see creeping in. This was my first time revisiting it in a while. What was your reaction on revisiting it?
I guess I had seen it, might have been earlier this year or at some point last year on the big screen. They did this thing called Disney Screen, where they would show like 4 Disney movies a day, every single day at this theater way out in the suburbs.
Wow.
It's very strange. Every single day. You could pay like $5 and watch 4 Disney movies every day. Anyway.
That's either a great or a terrible day.
Yeah, depending on the movie. So they were showing Rocketeer one day, and I'm like, oh, I definitely want to go see that. And watching it again tonight, I was impressed. Definitely, you could see the Raiders of the Lost Ark influence on it and everything, and that type of story. But you could also definitely see why they picked him to direct Captain America: The First Avenger.
Yes. Oh, hands down, yes.
Because,
Terry O'Quinn as Howard Hughes is basically, Tony Stark's dad in Captain America.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. So, it's definitely a solid movie. I mean, one of the things which I always found to be really interesting about it is, when I was in high school, a few years after this movie came out, I was working at a comic book store with, the biggest comic book snobs on the planet. And, this came out, like a couple years after Batman, the Tim Burton Batman, right?
Yes.
So obviously Batman was all the rage, in the mainstream, and that was, one of my favorite movies at the time too. To this day, my friend Josh will never not make fun of me for when I made a top 10 list of my favorite movies of all time, and one of the movies on the list was Batman Returns, because I only seen like 20 movies, so whatever, Batman Returns made it to the list. But these guys were super snobby when it came to, well, everything, but especially comic book movies, and you put something like Batman in front of them and they say like, that's nothing like the comic, that's garbage, that's just mainstream, whatever. And there were very, very few comic book movies back then. I'm sure there'd be a lot more now, but very, very few comic book movies back then which got a pass from them, which earned the One-Stop Comics seal of approval. And The Rocketeer was definitely one of them. That movie, I think, more than any other live-action movie, was sort of like seen as a true adaptation of the comic. Something which definitely captured the look and feel and spirit of the comic, even if certain things were changed.
Yes. Well, yeah. It definitely has that energy, that exuberance, and that. it's so interesting because I think you can look at something like The Rocketeer, and it's very much evocative of, comic books as they were understood before the dark times, before the Frank Miller era. And in a sense, it's so fascinating to me to go back and watch it because I remember that they were trying to evoke this with the Dick Tracy movie, and they failed miserably.
Yeah.
Like that was just blah. Whereas this one, I think what comes through more than anything is that Johnston is of the school where he totally understood and loved the source material that he was working with and the time period, and that there's a very much a loving evocation throughout the entire film where it has no pretensions about what it's doing. It's not trying to be, and now keep in mind, Captain America Winter Soldier is one of my favorite comic book movies ever, and is actually one of my favorite movies that I've seen in recent years because of the themes it deals with, which are very, government surveillance and overreach and, individuality and personal freedoms and all of that stuff. But The Rocketeer belongs to that school of let's have some fun. And this is going to be crazy and zany and alternate history. And we're just going to forget the world for 2 hours and have a blast. And there's such a charm about that any shortcoming it has otherwise, I have to overlook.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that is kind of like how the comic book feels as well. I mean, you brought up, like Frank Miller and The Dark Knight Returns and everything like that.
Yeah.
And the comic book came out around that same time. It was like in the mid-'80s. And I don't know if it was a response to it or if it was just sort of, another thing in the marketplace. But either way, it definitely has that sort of light, zany feel as well. Like the comic book feels like it was almost written in the 30s,
right,
as opposed to being sort of like a deconstruction of the format or anything like that. And,
right.
Like you're saying, the movie definitely, captures that as well. And I think that it does a really good job. The casting, I think, is really, really good.
Oh, absolutely spot on. And I think I'll even go so far as to say that this movie is responsible for everybody not completely hating Timothy Dalton for License to Kill.
Okay.
The second James Bond movie. No, seriously, because this is, in a large sense, I think that his portrayal, even though it's the villain in this, he has a lot of the Bond qualities that people wanted out of Bond that he never got a chance to play with. He's very Roger Moore-ish, if you will, in this. And so I think you can see very much that had they said to him, be a little looser and a little zanier, the way Roger Moore was, he could have pulled it off. So I can almost do this sort of mental transference of taking him from this and moving that sort of energy and delivery into Bond and say, oh, what if? Oh, I could see that happen. I could see that work. Makes sense?
It's weird because, this came out just a couple years after, License to Kill.
Well, Living Daylights was 87. This was 91. When
License to Kill was like 89.
Okay. Yes.
So
because License to Kill was almost in a sense a response to Die Hard.
Yeah.
They thought that's the way they needed to go. Yeah.
Okay. Well, there you go then.
Oops.
But it is weird because he does sort of, here he is playing the bad guy and everything like that. That's interesting. And, he has taken on, I think, a lot more roles like this, later on in his career, thinking about like, Hot Fuzz and that sort of thing,
Yes.
and it's weird because it's really hard to get out of that James Bond shadow,
Sure.
some people never do. And, he was able to do that for sure and really, really quickly, I think, which works. And, Billy Campbell, of course, he's extremely charming. He was the runner-up for Riker back in the day.
That would have been such a different Riker.
Yeah, it would have worked, but I don't know. Jonathan Frakes is Jonathan Frakes.
I agree it would have worked, but it would have been way different, and I can't see him rocking a beard the same way that Frakes does.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
No.
And he's really great on the 4400. I don't know if you've seen that.
No, I haven't watched that.
Oh, so good, so good. Ira Stephen Bear, just
Oh,
whatever.
there you go.
Wrong franchise, but regardless. And then, of course, there's Jennifer Connelly, who's amazing in everything.
Oh, she became a heartthrob for a ton of my friends after this movie came out.
Oh, just your friends, not you?
I'm impervious to such considerations,
Oh,
Mike.
okay.
I was looking with a purely critical eye while I was a junior in high school. I wasn't. No, I didn't even notice. I was like, "Oh, there was a girl on screen." Oh, I didn't even know. I was paying attention to plot.
That's one of the really interesting things about the comic book is in the comic book, the character's name is Betty, and she's very, very, very much inspired, like to the point of it being, definitely without question, an homage to Betty Page.
Mm-hmm.
And, Dave Stevens has done a lot of like Betty Page, like pinup artwork and everything like that. And there's a rumor that somewhere in the movie is Betty Page. She's in the background.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh.
Whether or not that's true, who knows? But that's the rumor in Hollywood is that she's there.
You know what's really interesting is like as we're talking about it, like my esteem for it is actually going up even more than when I rewatched it. And that's interesting because I'm realizing I liked it again even more than I thought I did. But when I rewatched it this time, I watched it with my oldest daughter, and what I realized was that there are a lot of things, sort of cultural references in the same vein as Aladdin, where very funny for my parents, funny for me by transference, and because sort of indoctrinated with the sensibility because Lucas and Spielberg, very much, called back to those things with the Raiders movies. But in this movie, there's W.C. Fields and there's Howard Hughes, and there are all of these callbacks to the era that my daughter has zero idea what they're talking about or why I chuckle when I see him throw the plans in and they have, and he says, because I'm Howard Hughes. And I'm like, and I have to look at her and say, I'll explain to you who Howard Hughes is, honey. And he had an interesting life.
We'll watch The Aviator tomorrow.
Yeah, right. Or why I'm chuckling when the model of the Spruce Goose is, glided out of the hangar and he goes, it really does fly. I mean, she has absolutely no idea why that's such a funny scene. Mm-hmm. And it's one of those things where she still chuckled at it. She thought it was funny simply because it was a guy flying on a model, to coast out to escape. And it's working on this other level for me. And it just reminds me of our discussion about the callbacks in Rogue One, mm-hmm. where these are the way you do callbacks. Like, she might not understand why them seeing W.C. Fields is funny, but she can understand at the least that this character is a bit of a lech and mm-hmm. thinks he's funnier than he actually is. And she can understand in the context of the movie, it doesn't matter whether she knows who W.C. Fields really was.
Yeah. What was your daughter's reaction to the movie on the whole?
Her words were that she thought it was fun and she liked it, but I could tell that she wasn't nuts about it. She was not unhappy that she watched it, but she wasn't clamoring to watch it again. Usually I can tell with my kids, the movies that they really like are the ones where same day they will come to me and they will say, I'd like to watch that again.
Yeah. Which
does happen. When we see certain movies, we'll leave and they'll talk about how they can't wait to watch it again when it comes out on video. Or, in a rare circumstance, could we go back to the theater and watch it again?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But this one, her reaction was, I liked it. I was like, okay, great, honey. I'm glad you did.
That's interesting because I don't know if you remember, but back in July, they announced that they're developing a sequel to The Rocketeer called The Rocketeers. And while it is, sort of a reimagining, it's also apparently going to be in the same universe, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But this time around, there's going to be, I guess, multiple Rocketeers. I don't know. But the lead character is going to be, as they describe it, a black female pilot who takes up the Rocketeer mantle 6 years after the events of the original movie.
Fascinating.
So they're definitely going for the younger demographic. They're going for, the kids
Sure.
and everything like that, which I think is really cool, because when you look at this movie, even though it is, very much sort of like a comic book movie and everything, it also does feel like you're saying like a Disney movie. Like this is something that you could watch with the whole family, even more so than, like Captain America, you know what I mean? And that's kind of cool. And I'm guessing that they're going to continue that trend with the Rocketeers.
But see, that what's so fascinating about that to me is I was actually refreshed in a sense at the end of this, because I looked at it and I said, wow, they contained it. They didn't actually leave some sort of nugget for a sequel. You don't have something where they say at the end, oh yeah, but I hid this one over there, or the way that however they do a sequel with this, they're going to have to pull one of those Lost World gags where it's like, but on this other island we had more dinosaurs. They're going to have to do that, because the Rocketeer is completely self-contained and it's completely happy with just being done at the end of it.
Yeah. I mean, here's the description as it was reported in Hollywood Reporter. The new take keeps the story in a period setting and offers a fresh view on the characters. Set 6 years after the Rocketeer and after Secord has vanished while fighting the Nazis, an unlikely new hero emerges, a young African-American female pilot who takes up the mantle of the Rocketeer in an attempt to stop an ambitious and corrupt rocket scientist from stealing jetpack technology in what could prove to be a turning point in the Cold War. So in some ways, it feels like kind of a remake. They're almost like
Cold War.
Force Awakenings.
Yeah.
Cold War seems, well, okay, if this was 38, then,
And 6 years later it's going to be 44.
So it's World War II still won't even be over with yet.
Correct, because VJ Day was in 45.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Who knows? Who knows exactly how all that'll work out.
It's because they're hiring kids that don't know their time periods, Mike.
I'm sure that's
although actually, the thing is, it's not like Stalin was really an ally in World War II, and the acrimony started well before that war finished. So, I could buy it. I could see that.
Yeah. But it's interesting that Disney kind of does this. They did it with Force Awakens, where, it's kind of a remake in a lot of ways, but it's also definitely a sequel and building on the original. They did it with Tron Legacy. I'd be very curious to know how many, average moviegoers had seen Tron prior to going into Tron Legacy,
I always think of that Simpsons Halloween special where Homer goes into the 3D world. Has anybody seen Tron? No. Yes. No.
Yeah, that's pretty much how it works, isn't it?
Yeah.
And, even so much so that when that movie starts up, it just says Tron, It doesn't even say Tron Legacy until the end. Like, you don't need to see the first one. And, to be honest, you really don't need to see the first one.
Actually, you really don't. It's a lot better in your memory than it is in actuality.
Yeah. But that second one, oh, man. Masterpiece.
Listen, man, I'm still mad they won't make a Tron 3. Still mad about it.
Yeah.
Just bogus. You can bring back the Rocketeer, but you can't give me Tron 3? Come on, guys. It's the same company, Disney.
Yep.
Don't hide behind these lies.
Yep.
Sorry.
Oh, well.
Have Joe Johnston direct it.
Have Joe Johnston direct it. And speaking of Joe Johnston directing things, here we've got a guy in a jetpack with a cool helmet, very similar to another Joe Johnston creation.
That's true.
That being Boba Fett. And this is the first time this is back before the Disney sale, okay? They were like re-releasing The Rocketeer on Blu-ray. And as part of the sort of promotional thing, they did a screening at the El Capitan in L.A., and Joe Johnston and a lot of other people behind the scenes and I think in front of the camera were present for this screening, and it was moderated by Kevin Smith. And after the thing, happened or whatever, Kevin Smith, who's a big fan of the movie, was talking about how he was talking to Joe Johnston, and Joe Johnston said that he really wanted to make a Boba Fett movie. And Kevin Smith was like, Lucas should just do it. Lucas should just give him the... It's like you're printing money at that point,
Yeah.
Everyone will go see a Boba Fett movie. You've got a top-tier filmmaker who wants to do it. Just do it. And then when the whole thing happened where it came out that, the postponed anthology movie, it was a Boba Fett movie, which Josh Trank was directing, from a script by Simon Kinberg and everything. And then, Trank, left the project
Self-destructed.
for whatever reason. The very first thing I did as soon as I heard that was I was like, Joe Johnston for Boba Fett movie. Get Joe Johnston to direct the Boba Fett movie. And like I tweeted that, and Joe Johnston favorited the tweet. And then I started looking, and I was not the only person by any stretch of the imagination who was like, they should get Joe Johnston to direct Boba Fett. And Joe Johnston was like, yep. So,
well, and the thing is, he's worked for Disney in the past. Rocketeer is a Disney movie. Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. Captain America,
the First Avenger, which is, here, look at that. The correlation there is so perfect, right? You're talking about Captain America, which is a standalone movie in this larger universe where, like, the Avengers are the episode movies, and then the character, standalones are the anthology movies or the stories, right? This is what you're talking about doing. You're talking about giving him a lower level Star Wars movie, something which he obviously knows a lot about because he was there from day one.
A fair amount. He does, yeah.
He created the freaking character, at least the look of him, in a lot of ways. Obviously there were a lot of people, who were involved, but he was instrumental in the creation of Boba Fett. Let's put it that way. Right.
He was very much, and I think that I didn't even think about the Boba Fett connection until you started talking about there's a guy with a rocket pack and a cool episode. Oh wow, yeah.
Although if you do look at the character design in Rocketeer, it's pretty much exactly the same as the comic.
Yeah, well, yes, but at the same time, I think that there is. It should not be underestimated how challenging it is to make that live and breathe in a world with real people.
That's definitely true.
Yeah. And I definitely think also that, because I was thinking about this while I was watching The Rocketeer, and I'll say pound for pound, it's the best thing Johnston's ever done, which doesn't take anything away. I liked it better than Captain America. I definitely liked it better than Jumanji.
Yeah, Jumanji.
Did not care for Jumanji at all.
Jumanji
Everybody
and
gets a scratch.
are kind of weak, I have to say. But I do love The Rocketeer, but I'd have to give Captain America the number one spot in the Joe Johnston.
Well, I guess I'll have to go back and rewatch Captain America: The First Avenger to see how I feel about that. But yeah, that you do raise a good point, because looking at this, everything about this, it's structured. The plot is well put together. It's edited nicely. It looks good. It flows really well. The Horner score is actually one of the better Horner scores. I'd forgotten he did this soundtrack.
Was this James Horner, really?
Yeah.
It didn't sound like him at all.
Yeah. He obviously is a guy who can, get the job done and, can tell a story that is, look, it's enjoyable for somebody who is in his 40s watching it with his child who is substantially less, less old. And they both can plug into it and enjoy it. Like you said, it's a family thing. It'd be interesting because I don't think Boba Fett should be something where I'm taking my kids and being like, hey, let's go watch this guy slaughter people, kids.
It's he's a proven talent, inside the confines that, he would be working with this Boba Fett movie. He proven at that specific studio, not to mention the fact that he was instrumental in the creation of this franchise. So it only makes sense. Few things, this is like the equivalent of when, they got, Brian Fuller to, create Star Trek Discovery. It's like, it just makes sense. All of the pieces fit in place so well that it's the type of thing where they would be crazy not to get Joe Johnston. And yet it's so perfect that when they get Joe Johnston to direct it, it's going to blow all of our minds because things this perfect usually don't happen.
They usually don't. I certainly hope they do this time.
Yes, which apparently, I mean, the word on the street now, the rumors floating around the internet the past few days are that the Boba Fett movie is back on track. I think probably the box office at Rogue One, convinced them that there is, money to be made from these Star Wars stories, and
also the money that it's making justifies a heavy studio hand and lots of notes.
Well, that's true too. But he's someone who can take them. I mean,
oh, no doubt, no doubt,
so
no doubt.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, Johnston knows what Disney wants out of a movie. He's proven that time and time again, and he has delivered consistent hits through his career.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Yeah.
Definitely. So you recommend it for people to rent and watch The Rocketeer if they haven't seen it?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Especially, with the comic book movie craze being at an all-time high, I think that, this might be a hidden gem from another era when comic book movies were kind of looked down upon, that captures the feel of a lot of the movies, which are, beloved today. Mm-hmm. So if you haven't seen The Rocketeer and you're a fan of comic book movies, especially like the Marvel Universe, check it out, because it definitely feels like, a prototypical Marvel movie.
Completely agree with you, and I will tack on that it's also fun to watch simply for the fact that you're seeing a movie about a guy with a jetpack before the computer revolution.
Mm-hmm.
It will be hard to watch this and not think to yourself, oh, they totally do this in 3D, and that would be CG at this point.
Yeah.
Whereas they use a lot of blue screen and practical wind-blown effects and those sorts of things throughout the entire thing. And in a sense, it's a swan song for a forgotten era in that way as well.
Yeah.
So, okay. Well, we both recommend it, and we both think you should go out and see it. We also think that you should help support the Nerd Party Network by going over to lootcrate.com/nerdparty, enter the code nerdparty, and get your discount on a box of goodies sent to you once a month, covering everything from your different geek desires. There's a different theme every single month. It's delivered straight to you. T-shirts, collectibles, rare goodies that you can't get anywhere else. They're sent to you through Loot Crate. Go to lootcrate.com/nerdparty. Use the code nerdparty. If you want to reach out to Great Shot Kid and send us a note, maybe you've seen The Rocketeer, you have a different take, or we missed something, go to thenerdparty.com/contact. Look up Great Shot Kid. Send us an email through there. We will respond to you. We had a recent note from one of our listeners, and we'd love to interact with even more of you. And Mike, if they want to reach out to you online, where can they find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Mumbles3K, and you can also find me on commentarytrackstars.com doing hopefully some rather consistent new episodes of Commentary Track Stars, where we do a lot of commentaries and other things. We just did a commentary for Mad Max Fury Road, so be sure to check that out. And you can also find me on Trek.fm, where today we just released the very last episode of From There to Here. And I also do another show called Stage 9, where we look at the people who make Star Trek with John.
Yes, with me. And so if you want to learn about the creators of Star Trek, especially the creators of Discovery that are coming up, go over to Stage 9 over in the Trek.fm network, where Mike and I discuss those creators. Or you can stay here on the Nerd Party Network and hear me talking with Matt Rushing on Aggressive Negotiations, where we delve into some of the stranger aspects of Star Wars itself, the different story beats and themes. And you can also find me over on Words with Nerds with my pal Craig. And then, of course, go online and look for Kessel Junkie. That's me.